Welcome back to the Ownership Advantage. My name is Tanner Bryan. We're here at another edition of the Coach's Corner. Got our coach, Doug Barra, here on the team. Talking about some fun things today. We're just talking offline about this idea of abdication versus delegation. When are you maybe doing a little too much within the business? Difficulty to let go of things. And I thought that'd be a really fun topic, because if you're out there in the audience and you're listening to this, my guess is at various points throughout your journey, there's probably some things in this that are going to resonate with you. So Doug, I'm going to just hand it over. If you want to kind of give us some context of like what you've been seeing and feeling with maybe some of the clients that you've been working with over the last couple of weeks, why this topic is kind of front and center or top of mind for you today.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic because it covers a lot of different areas. Right. If I just start with delegation versus abdication, the world of, okay, I turned that over to somebody and they didn't do it right. Right. And the questions just start flying in my head like, well, did you actually tell them what you wanted? Did you give them guidelines for how to do it properly? Did you actually train them? And then the world of that superheroitis pops up because it's like, well, where else do you feel like you just can't have anybody else do something?
Yeah.
Right. And, for me, that kind of always lived in, if you've got superheroitis, you don't let people do much, right? You try to do everything or anything that's complicated or anything that, requires any thought, me as the super boss, I got to jump in and make it happen. And, we were having the conversation at our workshop the other day about it. And one of the things that really popped up at me is, oh my God, I have superheroitis, right? And, I'd known about it in the past that I did it, right? And most everything I had like, okay, no, I'm going to delegate this, I'm going to delegate that. But I really came down to there was one thing that even in 20 years, I have never been willing to delegate. I tried it a few times, but it never quite worked out. And that was my bookkeeping, right? I'm a fairly smart rat. So, I know how it's supposed to look. I'm supposed to say, okay, we can give this to a bookkeeper. They're going to be able to take it over. They're going to handle it. But what always ended up happening was I'd spend more time fixing their mistakes than it would take me to do it myself. And so then I'd be like, can't give this to a bookkeeper. They can't do my books, not the way I like them. It's not going to work. I've got to do it. And we were sitting in that meeting and all of a sudden something dawned on me. It was like, wait a minute. Did I ever actually take the time to train a bookkeeper how to do them properly? And the answer is no. They're a bookkeeper. I just handed it to them and went, you know how to do bookkeeping. It's yours. Go for it. And I walked away and then came back later and went, well, you did it all wrong. Go away. Right? Not, okay, we have to sit and do this together because I'm pretty particular about how my books are done. I've got spreadsheets that I want managed in certain ways and properly, and these are all things that are part of the process, and it's not just go and enter information into QuickBooks and hope it's in the right place or have to call me for every single line item and find out, well, where does this go? Because that doesn't work either. Mm-hmm. But I never actually sat down and trained them. And training isn't necessarily okay, here's the books, this is how I do it, bye.
Yeah.
Right? Training can take a long time. I was working with a client yesterday, day before or something like that. And we were talking about, well, how do you actually train somebody properly? And I was like, well, it depends on how much they know, how particularly well it needs to be done, right? But you have to take the time. I always say there's 4 stages to training, right? I do, you watch. I do, I explain what I do, and you give back to me what you heard, right? Then you do explaining to me what you're doing so that I can see whether or not you're doing it properly. And then you do and I watch just to make sure, right? And I was like, but that's not 4 sessions. Those could be months of sessions because you can't move from one to the other until you know that section, especially where it's, I explain what I did and you tell me back. If I haven't gotten to the point where you're telling me back what I told you, right? Then there's no sense moving on to the next section because you're not going to do what I wanted you to do.
Yeah.
Right? And only once I'm clear that you're doing what I told you to do, can we take that next step where you do it and you can put your flavor to it. Mm-hmm. Right? Kind of like, there's a great quote, and I don't remember who it's from, but it's like, if you want to be a great musician, you have to learn the chords. You have to learn all of the things to do it perfectly. And then you throw it all away and wail, right? But you can't throw it all away and wail until you know all those things, because otherwise your wailing is going to be off the charts and not something that's actually, musically inclined, right? That actually works musically. And the same's true with training, right? I can't let you go and do your own thing until I know you know how to do it my way. Then you can expand on it, make it better, but you know what the things are that have to be there. And yeah, you might be able to find a better way to do it. I don't think I'm the best at anything, but there are guidelines to the way it needs to be done.
So I want to take a step back. Here's some of your thoughts on why is this so often missed, right? I think of, we'll say earlier stage business owners, small business owners, things like that. And this is, you're really defining that definition between delegation and abdication. Delegation really has this training process along with it. It's getting these pieces in place. But yet we tend to see a lot of, small business owners abdicate. They don't really know that they're doing it, but is it a function of, I just need somebody on the team that can do this thing because I just don't have time to do all this stuff anymore, and I just hope and pray that it's going to go the way that it needs to? Is it just not knowing these steps? If you strip it all the way down, what do you think is kind of behind the fact that we tend to see more small businesses in their first couple hires do more abdication than they do proper delegation?
Yeah, I'll tell you what my thought is about it. I think that, and a lot of this comes from, what I've done myself, right? Where I've come from. But a lot of it is what you said, right? We're a small business. We're in a hurry. We need to get things done. People have been telling us we need to have team members because we can't do it alone. You start to see these, businesses that suddenly blew up and were great, and they suddenly became these great businesses. So you've got it in your head. Well, it doesn't take a lot of time. So, I should be able to just bring people in and let them do this work, or I should be able to, hire somebody as a contractor to get them to do this work. And, and that, I think that's one of the big ones. That was the big thing for me with the bookkeepers, right? I figured, well, I'm hiring a bookkeeper. They know how to keep books, right? I don't need to train them. I don't need to take that time. And training takes time. If I can do it in 10 minutes and training them is going to take 2 hours, where do I find those other, hour and 90 minutes to get it done? But the thing is, if I do the 10 minutes and I don't train them, then I'm going to be doing the 10 minutes for the rest of my life, right? I have to find the time. I think the other piece is, a lot of times we look at it and we go, well, I've got all these things that I need to delegate. So I'm going to get to delegating them all. I'm going to hire people. I'm going to throw people at it, right? If I've got the money to hire somebody, I'm just going to hire somebody, or I'm going to, hire a contractor to work on that. And then I don't have to deal with it anymore. Sometimes we do that just because we hate it, right? I mean, how many people love numbers? Right? How many people love doing their books? Even I don't, and I'm good at it. it. After a couple of hours of doing the books, I'm like, oh God, I need a break. I can't look at any more numbers, right? And I'm I'm a trained mathematician. I should be able to do this stuff, right? But we just get caught up in and there's so many ways we do that, right? We get caught up in I've got to get more done. I've got to get more business in. I've got to get more. I've got to get more. I've got to get more. And sometimes I think we just have to learn to slow down and say, you know what? It's not going to help to just get more. If I don't do it in a way that actually supports me and the business, it's not going to help. But we don't know that. And the only way we know that is
what's fascinating, this is slightly I wouldn't say a tangent, but a slightly different direction on kind of the same basic topic. But the idea of sometimes the things that we're doing that's either on our plates or even sometimes on our team members' plates just aren't worth doing to begin with. And sometimes it's the process of deleting things and saying, well, does it really need to get done? Which can be really hard. You take something like, I'm going to throw social media content under the bus for a minute. Not saying that it's not important, so don't take that as the lesson from this. But as an example for a business that maybe they've never generated business from social media organic marketing, and frankly, nobody's really taken a look at it, and like their skill set is better served at a specific point in time doing the things and maybe talking to their current clients and getting referrals and working with networking groups or things of that nature. But you feel you got to be doing content, so you write a blog and you do some content for social media reels on Instagram, and you put up some posts, and like all of a sudden that's consumed an entire day and a half of your week. It's like, well, do we need to outsource that, or does that just not need to be done because there's 12 hours of time that isn't having a return on investment at this moment? Could it work at some point? Sure. Like, again, that's not the argument or the point I'm trying to make. But in that moment, do we even need to delegate it? Or does it make sense to just say, let's pull back the curtain, take a look at everything and just say, is this even worth doing? Or is the time capital that I have better allocated somewhere else, or my team's time, or my team's the money towards all of this, or whatever it is that better allocated towards something different at this point that's going to produce the results that I'm ultimately looking to solve for?
Yeah, absolutely. You see that all the time, because you go into, okay, time management, and it's like, okay, well, what else do I need to put in to make to get my time? It's like, no, sometimes you just have to take something out. It's not just about what do I start doing or what do I add to the list. Sometimes it's what do I stop doing? And I love your example, right? Because marketing is such an easy one to actually define, right? If I'm measuring it, right? And, we have to be measuring it, because if we're not measuring it, we have no idea what's working and what's not working. But if I'm measuring, and I can measure any area, that was one of the things I was talking to the business owner about. She said, well, how do I know what they should be doing? I'm like, well, you have to be measuring it, right? You have to know what they're getting done. And if they're getting, blah, 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 blah done, but it's not making a difference, then they should probably stop doing blah, 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 blah. Right? One of the things that, and this is just a little pet peeve thing for me, but, this whole world of, working hourly and being expected to be working the entire time you're on the clock. You really have to think about that. And is that something that is conducive to producing the results that you're trying to produce? The first time I ever read the 4-Hour Work Week, I think it's called. Mm-hmm. My first response was, yeah, you can't do that. That's not even slightly, above the board. But some of what he's talking about makes sense, right? I want to know that the people that are working for me are focused on the results that they're producing, not putting in the hours, right? Because, hey, I can make a task last all day if I want to, but that doesn't produce the result that that task was supposed to generate.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been on both sides. I've been the hourly employee that, just trying to get their day done and go home at the end of the day and take their breaks when they're supposed to take their breaks and, and just chug at what they told me to get done. Right? Which is fine if you're like in a manufacturing situation where you've got this widgets you've got to make and you're just making the widgets and making the widgets and making the widgets. But not all of us work in that kind of a situation, right? Some of us have something that we want to actually accomplish. Yeah. Right? And even the widgets, right? Can I make them faster? Right? Can I get more widgets done?
I would argue that there's probably a lot less of that type of work that exists today anyway. Because if you think about like how that work is structured, it's very workflow oriented. It's very repetitive. It's very like there's a defined set of terms that happens every second, minute, hour, whatever during that time period. That's what the robots are going to be doing. All the rest of our type of work is more of how do we produce more per unit of time. I've always been, kind of the mindset, at least with our team, if you have your set KPIs, whatever it is for the week, if you accomplish all of that on Monday, I really don't care what you do the rest of the week. Like, cause you're getting paid for outcomes and output. And like, there are reasons that you are here that produces something that you're really, really good at. If it takes you all 5 days, or if it takes you 4 days, or if it takes you like, do what you need to do to get the work done. And, then put the incentive structure on the back end that says if you do more, you can earn even more. So then you can kind of control your destiny beyond that. But I think it's fascinating to see how the model of work has shifted from, the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and now into a very different style of economy. And again, it's changing even faster today. But, fascinating to see and think about how those pieces come together.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this whole world of the gig economy, right, is really based on that, right? Stop working for somebody and go out and produce results and get paid for those results. And then, you can set your own schedule. It's not quite as easy as that.
You still have to get the actual results.
Exactly. You have to get the actual results. You have to get the gigs themselves. So, if you're going out on your own, unless you've got some way to get those gigs that doesn't include you having to go out and do the marketing, you're going to invest a lot of time in doing a lot of things that you didn't have to do when all you did was work for somebody getting the
It's almost
job
like
done.
You actually have to do marketing and sales and fulfillment and then manage your financial bits on the then now we're in kind of a whole business thing and lots of different pieces there.
Yeah, all of a sudden I'm in business and I'm in business for myself and oh my God, this is a whole different story.
Yeah, you stop working 40 hours for somebody else and you start working 80 hours for yourself and you find yourself as probably a worse boss than the one before. Yeah, it just tends to be that transition. So I want to go back to the superheroitis and kind of really thinking about that for a minute. Before I want to take a couple different directions on it. But the first one I think is probably really relevant to a lot of the audience. Why is it so hard? Like, what stops people from giving up some of these things? You gave the example of kind of one thing that you were really good at delegating some stuff, but then there was just like this one piece that it was really difficult to be comfortable with it, right? Like, what do you think's underneath that? Like, where does some of that come from? Why is it so hard for some people to just take a step back and maybe have that moment where they go, I can't do this all alone. I wish I could. I want to be the smartest person in the room and be able to do all this stuff, but I just simply can't. Why is it so hard for most, not everybody, but for most, to make that transition?
Well, I think that, first off, there are those people who really don't want to admit that they're not the smartest person in the room, right? And sometimes if we start talking about middle management, we get the people who they truly believe that the way to shine is to do it all themselves. They don't want to give that credit to somebody else. They think that's what makes them look better in the eyes of their boss, right? So some of that is just the training, getting people to really understand, no, you look better when all of your people are thriving, right? Because once all of your people are thriving, your productivity is going to go through the roof. And, you know, ultimately your boss, unless they're, in the same mindset that you are, doesn't really care how much work you do. They want to know how much work your team does. And they want that to be, the highest level possible of getting the results. I think another piece of it is just that adrenaline rush of, I was able to go save the day. And we get addicted to that. We get those endorphins running, and it's, feels good to be that hero and go in and save the day. And then we forget that, but that's not training our team to do anything other than go, oh, hey, want a break? Let's break something. Mm-hmm. Super boss will come and take over for a while. We can go on break. Yeah. Right. But ultimately, I think it's blindness. I think that we don't see it. We don't realize what we're doing. That's certainly what it was for me in this particular case, right? Because I think sometimes we just don't like doing things, so we have no problem giving that away, right? But if I like doing it, and I like the adrenaline rush of coming in and saving the day, I get blind to the fact that I'm doing it at all. And then I need somebody external to go, hey, why are you doing that? Yeah. That was what I did with my client the other day. I was like, why are you doing that? And they're like, what do you mean? So, why are you doing that? That is not a job you should be doing. Mm-hmm. And they're like, what do you mean? It's got to do with pay. And I said, yeah, and? Well, nobody else should be dealing with pay. I'm like, yeah, why? Give me one good reason why you should even be touching pay. Well, nobody else knows. Yeah. No, nobody else knows because nobody else has been trained. It's got nothing to do with that you're the only one who can do it. I always love that grid, right? Where it's, you have all the different levels of, is it something that takes a lot of skill, or is it something that takes very little skill or medium skill? And how much time does it take? How much value does it actually provide to the business, right? And there's that one corner these are the things that take the most skill. They provide the most value. That's the only thing you should be doing as a business owner. That's the only quadrant you should ever be working in. Everything else should be delegated, right? But we don't always look at it that way. It's like, well, no, I don't want to give up, this is the stuff I like to do. Yeah, well, think about how much you're losing. If when you're doing the absolute highest value thing you could do for the business, is that worth $500 an hour, $1,000 an hour? Mm-hmm. And you could pay somebody $15 an hour, $30 an hour to do that work, $25, $100. You're still, the difference in opportunity cost is crazy until people actually look at that and go, oh, you mean it's actually costing me, $400 an hour to pay somebody, to not pay somebody $100 an hour to do that. Yeah. Then all of a sudden they go, oh, wait a minute, maybe I could pay somebody to do that.
What's interesting is I can't remember how this came up the other day, but I was thinking about kind of some different ideas or thoughts about, what we do here in coaching and how that progresses a business owner through their journey, right? We have many clients that come to us that are like early days, couple team members, and they grow to, 10, 20, 30, 50 plus team members over time. And you see them grow in their journey. And as I'm now kind of thinking back on some of this superheroitis, perhaps sometimes as leaders, as business owners, we just get stuck in it's superheroitis because I got so good at this thing that I want to go solve this problem, because if I'm stuck solving this problem that I know how to solve, I don't have to go chase that harder problem. That as I grow, we're going to have new types of challenges and problems. Like, we get to work on harder things the more we grow through that journey. Now, some of it's going to move from the physical work to heavily mental work, and then eventually kind of into like, how do we allocate resources? But each of these levels are new, hard, challenging problems that, frankly, as a business owner, you probably don't know how to do yet. So it's easy to go solve the thing I know how to solve because I can feel really good about doing the thing I'm good at. Nobody loves to feel like they're, pardon my friend, to feel like they're shit at something, right? That's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I kind of wonder about, this superheroitis in that frame. As I have a feeling that's probably a big piece of why people choose to stay, frankly, solving the same problems instead of choosing to go tackle the new problems.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. When you look at this whole world of, learning and those stages of learning, right? You get to that point where it's like, you're really good at this. I can do this without even thinking. And then, oh, but that level, ooh, that's a whole different ballgame. Just think about driving, right? I know how to drive a car, right? I can drive a car, drink a coffee, have a conversation with somebody, and, go from point A to point B, not put anybody at risk, and be fully present to driving. But if you put me in a race car, I don't know I'd make it around the track,
Yeah, that's a good example.
I don't have any idea how to drive a race car around a track. So that would be a completely new experience. And even just saying it, I'm like, yeah, there was a time I would have loved to learn that, but right now it's like, would I even want to learn that? I'm very happy knowing how to drive my car and get from point A to point B and get there safe, and still have conversations with people in the car and all that sort of thing, and not get completely distracted from what I'm doing, because a lot of it is just automatic. I know how to do it. So yeah, I think it is a big piece of it, because most people don't know how to go to that next level. Yes, I've gotten the business to the point where I could scale it, but what does that mean? Where do I have to focus? What do I have to do? How do I take this business that's working and take it to that next level? Oh my God. No, I'm going to just focus on these things I know how to do and focus there.
I think the part that's also interesting on this is, like, when you do make that decision to go to the next level, and it's uncomfortable, you're learning new things, but how do you choose not to go backwards? And you said something earlier that I think was important, which was that outside perspective that kind of taps you on the shoulder and says, why are you doing things this way? Or hey, pay attention, there's kind of some stuff that you're starting to slip back into. Like, the example that comes to mind for me, because I've gone through different iterations of this myself, and part of it, I remember sitting in a coaching session with our coach, and he's, at one point he's like, Tanner, congratulations, you are now no longer to get results yourself. You have to get all of your results through people. Like, oh, okay, because I'm really good at going and doing the stuff. And there's been a couple times since making that transition. I said, all right, I'm all in. Let's do this. I got to learn this lesson. Like, I'm coachable. Let's go. And as things transpire, and you have some things that go really well and some things that don't go well as you go through this journey. And I remember a couple times, it's like, all right, now we have to go solve this problem that we had already figured out how to solve. So it's like one of those bosses that we figured out how to slay. Couple levels down. I know what to go do, but now I have to make sure that the person down there at that level is doing that. And it can be really easy to say, but I can just jump in and go do it so we can get back to focusing on our current level of things. And sometimes that outside perspective, that person that just says, hey, by the way, you're trying to go solve something that you shouldn't be solving anymore. Your new level of this is how do you translate that knowledge down to the person that needs it so that they can level up and go through that same process. You got to learn that lesson, and it's very different.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, it takes an outside perspective. This is why, people have forever and a day had mentors, and, why the coaching industry has gotten as big as it is, because if you don't have somebody on the outside looking, just think about sports, right? Is there any sports team out there that doesn't have coaches? No, they all have
successful
coaches.
Ones.
Yeah, not successful ones, right? And I'm talking, successful, major league or whatever, high level, and you have to think about it. It's like, is that coach on the field? No, the coach is on the sidelines. The coach has got the overview. The coach might even be way up in the bleachers, and they almost certainly have somebody who's way up that can see it from a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I always like to tell my clients, I'm the guy who's on the platform, 500 feet above, saying, yeah, no, the path is over there. I know the tree's right here, but the path is over there. Head that way. Right? Because I can't be there. And that's why, I use a coach, right? I have you as a coach. I have Andy as a coach. I have other coaches that I've had for years, right? Because I can't see all that. I need somebody on the outside to, sometimes slap me across the face or crack me in the head because I'm difficult at times, right?
And
it's funny because
we all feel that way and have same stuff. I need people that can just knock me across.
That's an entrepreneur, right? People aren't entrepreneurs because they like being told what to do, or they're even really great at that advice, right? They're entrepreneurs because they love what they do and they want to have the freedom.
Mm-hmm. But
it takes a really, powerful entrepreneur to go, no, I need some outside perspective, right? I don't like somebody telling me to do, I don't like telling people what to do, but I want somebody to be able to say, hey, have you thought about this?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Have you noticed this? By the way, I've seen this over here. Is that what's going on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think as we bring kind of this conversation to a close on this topic of superheroitis, delegation, abdication, kind of understanding that we need to take the time to train the individuals that we're bringing into our circle, internal team members, contractors, doesn't matter. Like kind of all those things fit together for this. When you think of like the audience that's listening to this right now, if you could leave them kind of with one piece, whether it's a piece of advice or a tactical thing that they can do on this specific topic, leaving this conversation today, what would you encourage them to pay attention to or go take action on?
I would say really take a quick look and a serious look at what you say you have to do. And really, is it something that only you can do? And that takes a real looking. You really have to think about it because it's very easy to get caught up in it's the only thing I can do because everybody I've ever tried to teach can't do it. No, that's not the reason why only you can do it because it is that top tier in the pyramid or whatever. These are the things that only you can do. Literally only you can do. Right? Like if we're talking about setting the direction of the business, only you can do that. Everybody else can't do that. That's you. It's your business. Right? But there's plenty of other things that somebody else can do. And the other thing is be present to the fact that systemization is always possible. Because if I'm going to train, I have to have systems. And to look and say, well, it's always done differently. No, it's not always done differently. There's at least parts of every process that are done the same way every time. And somebody can be trained to do that piece. And even the parts that aren't, there's probably somebody who could be trained to do the pieces that require the human interaction, right? And it ain't AI. Okay, AI can do a lot, but AI does what you ask it to do. Right? AI is not going to go out and invent things on its own. I'm sorry, but it does not. We haven't gotten that far quite yet. I don't know that we ever will. I mean, AI is always going to be algorithms. It can take things and put them together in new and interesting ways that we haven't thought about, but it's still taking things that already exist and putting them together. It's not coming up with new, interesting things on its own. Sorry, I took a tangent. I didn't.
It's a good note because I mean that's obviously a topic that's going to relate to a lot of this stuff, and you know, there is no stakes with the AI. Does not have stakes. It's not going to get. It does not care if it's going to get fired if it makes a wrong call. Like, use it where it's appropriate and use true human judgment where it's appropriate, which means we got to extract that out of our own heads, pull it into training, and learn to delegate the process of decision making.
Yeah. But, you know, it's an interesting thought that just popped into my head around that. Learning to train an AI might be a good way also to learn how to train your employees.
100%. 100%.
Right? Because you have to tell it every little piece. And if you don't, it's not going to know how to, you're not going to get the results you want. So it's actually, I think, a good training ground for training.
Mm-hmm. It can help you create the training by going through and training it. Like it's a phenomenal tool when you start thinking about it in that context. And, you know, some of these tools make it even easier today. I know that Claude for sure has now opened up the I can't remember what it's called, but you can like screen record and talk while you do something to create a skill, which is basically just a workflow of actions. Same way you would train a team member, where it'll create all that for you. So you could literally take that and then have it build the document that you go give to your team member so they can essentially train themselves and you get your time back. Oh, crazy. But it needs the same context, right? It's context of what your business is and what you do. How do you do things specifically? How does it produce the output? Run that to get kind of mastery of it. And then as you calling back to what you had said earlier, then once we've learned that, now we can put our spice on it. Now we can like, I think we can improve this here. I think we can do this little piece here. Then we can start to kind of have some freedom to improve the process. But you got to learn the process before you can improve it. Otherwise, you're just making stuff up and hoping for the same result. It's like, well, there's a proven process that gets you there. Let's use that as the base framework.
Yep.
So, all right. This good segue into kind of how we'll truly wrap up today. One of the big topics with regards to delegation, abdication, superheroitis is this concept of like how dependent is your business on you? And one of the best ways to figure out kind of where am I at in my own business today on this process is we've got take a little scorecard test type thing. We've got a chat interface tool that will actually give you your dependency score out of a total score of 100. Give you a couple action items to take if you're down in the 20s or if you're up in the 40s or 80s or wherever you're at. But it's a really good tool to just see where you're at in your business and kind of what the next steps are to become have the business be a little bit less dependent on you as a business owner. If that's interesting, you want to take that. It's free to take. The link to that will be in the description or the show notes. So that'd be an easy next step for you to just kind of get some tangible numbers to go with it. So with that, Doug, this has been fun. I love these Coach's Corner episodes because it allows us to kind of go deep on some different topics and the insight, not just from your own experience, but you know what you've seen with clients over the years too, has been amazing. So thank you so much for jumping on and having this conversation today.
Thank you. Had a blast.